how does a place go from just being a collection of islands on a map to a nation in the hearts and minds of its people? Well, today we're jumping into the incredible story of the Philippines and how a true national identity was born. And what's wild is that it was sparked by events happening thousands and thousands of miles away. Let's get right into it.
I mean, really think about it. What does it mean to love a country? Is it about the land, a shared language, or maybe the struggles you've gone through together? For a lot of us, that feeling just is. But for every single nation, that feeling has an origin story.
And that is the core idea for us today. The birth of Filipino nationalism wasn't just some isolated event. Nope, it was a global story. It was basically a perfect storm of local suffering meeting these revolutionary new ideas that had crossed entire oceans to get there.
Okay, so first up, we've got to rewind a bit. We need to get a picture of what things were like before this idea of a single, unified Filipino nation even existed. It's a world that's pretty hard to imagine from where we're standing today.
All right, so let's get on the same page with this key word, nationalism. It's way more than just waving a flag. It's this powerful belief that your people, your culture, form a distinct nation, and that you have the right to be free and to steer your own ship. You know, before the Spanish arrived, an idea like that, uniting the whole archipelago, was just unthinkable.
What's so fascinating here is the contrast. You know, before colonization, you had all these separate communities, each with its own language, its own traditions. Then the Spanish come in. They force people into these towns, the pueblos, and bring in a totally new system. And here's the irony. The shared experience of oppression, of suffering under one single ruler, accidentally started to build a common identity where there wasn't one before. It was a really painful but crucial first step.
So you've got this pot of shared hardship to simmering away, but it needed a spark. And that spark didn't come from inside the colony. It came from thousands of miles away, from the intellectual heart of Europe.
And these guys, these were the real game changers. They were the wealthy Filipinos, the ilustrados, who had the money and opportunity to go study in Spain and other parts of Europe. And over there, they weren't just learning about medicine or law. They were breathing in the air of a massive philosophical revolution we now call the Enlightenment.
And this breaks it down perfectly. 3 simple but earth-shattering words that had literally toppled the king in France. Liberty, the right to be free. Equality, the idea that no one is born better than anyone else. And fraternity, the sense of brotherhood, of being one people. I mean, can you imagine hearing these ideas for the first time, coming from a super rigid colonial system? It must have been mind-blowing.
And of course, the people in charge back in the Philippines were absolutely terrified. They knew exactly how dangerous these ideas were to their whole setup. I mean, if the people they called Indios started to actually believe they deserved liberty and equality, well, the whole colonial game would be up. This fear just made them crack down even harder, which, you guessed it, only fanned the flames. But hold on, it wasn't just philosophies and ideas crossing the ocean. Huge political and economic changes happening in Spain itself were about to send massive shockwaves all the way to the Philippines.
Okay, this was a huge deal. Back in Spain, there was a struggle going on, and the liberals managed to create this thing called the Cadiz Constitution. For its time, it was incredibly radical. We're talking freedom of speech, representation, things like that. And even though it never fully took effect in the colony, just the fact that it existed changed the entire conversation.
So, this new liberal constitution had 3 enormous knock-on effects. First, it killed the old restrictive galleon trade that had been going on for centuries. Second, it basically gave an official thumbs up to all those Enlightenment ideas the Ilustrados were already talking about. And third, it pushed the colony towards a much more open, global system of trade.
So let's break that down. Think of it like this. Under the old system, mercantilism, the Philippines was basically just a treasure chest for Spain. Its only job was to make the mother country richer. But capitalism, or laissez-faire, threw open the doors. Suddenly, Filipinos could trade their own goods, like sugar, tobacco, and abaca, with the whole world. This created a brand new class of wealthy Filipinos who were way more connected to other countries and way less dependent on Spain.
So we have new ideas floating around and new money changing hands. Now for the last major piece of the puzzle. A massive engineering project that would literally shrink the planet and speed everything up.
1 month. Just one. After the Suez Canal opened up in 1869, the trip from Europe to the Philippines went from a brutal 3-month voyage down to just 30 days. Just stop and think about what a massive change that is.
And you can see the chain reaction right here. A shorter trip means more ships, right? More traders, more visitors from Europe. And they weren't just bringing cargo, they were bringing books, newspapers, pamphlets, all filled with these radical, revolutionary ideas. The flow of information went from a tiny trickle to an absolute flood. So now, for the first time, Filipino thinkers could get their hands on first-hand accounts of how the American colonies broke away from Great Britain, or how the people of France overthrew their own king. These weren't just abstract theories anymore, they were practical blueprints for revolution. It proved that this kind of change wasn't just a dream, it had actually been done.
So you take all of this, the new ideas, the economic freedom, the world suddenly getting smaller, and it all comes together to create something totally new in the Philippines.
This was it. This was the awakening. It was this dawning realization that they weren't just subjects of a faraway king. They were a people, a nation, with a shared past and, maybe, a shared future. The seeds that had been planted were finally starting to grow.
So, just to recap the whole thing, these were the 4 global sparks that really lit the fire. You had the powerful ideas from the Enlightenment, the political shockwaves from the Kazakh Constitution, the new economic power that came with capitalism, and finally, the incredible connection made possible by the Suez Canal. And that really brings us to our final thought. We've spent this time talking about the sparks, these external forces that came from all over the world. But you know, a spark is pretty useless if there's no fuel to catch fire. So the question to leave you with is this: what was the local fuel? What were the injustices, the sacrifices, and the simmering anger of the Filipino people that turned those sparks into an unstoppable fire? Well, that's a story for another day.